Jolly good show, Major.
What's going on, 12s? This is Rob English, your SoCal Seahawk, checking in with Short Yardage. This will be our first edition of Short Yardage, the midweek check-in on the Seattle Seahawks, the goings-on of the team, again, from personnel to front office stuff to goings-on with the players, upcoming games, things of that nature. Followed by the Going the Distance show, which will be on Mondays. But this is Short Yardage. And in Short Yardage, tonight we're going to talk about just a few things that have come about in the last few days, namely the running back situation. We'll go through basically pretty much who we have running the ball coming up here on Sunday against the Browns. We got Derek Coleman. Let's talk about Derek Coleman's possible contribution to the running game. DeJuan Harris being cut. Christine Michael being signed again. Bryce Brown coming in from the free agent market. Beast mode status. And Fred Jackson and what he'll probably continue to do here. We'll also get into some comments that were made by Browns head coach Mike Pettin. We'll look at the clinching scenarios for the Seahawks here, which as of this week actually do have a serious implications. All the games this week, excuse me, have serious implications on playoff seeding or playoff clinching. So we'll get into that, and we'll trail off the show with just some random things. But just getting to the running game, it was really, really unfortunate and really sad to see Thomas Rawls leave the game last Sunday against Baltimore because and when he went down, I saw the way he went down when it happened, and I was looking at it and I was like, gosh, he kind of went down kind of awkward. And I was hoping that, there was nothing wrong with him, but you could just tell by the way, I don't know, maybe some folks saw it, maybe some folks didn't. I saw it and I was kind of hoping I was wrong about what I saw. But when I watched him go down, that was an awkward way to go down. And then the way he even walked off the field, I figured, okay, he rolled over something, but he'll be all right. Cause he, for a broken ankle, he sure walked off the field. If I remember correctly, he walked off the field under his own power. Somebody can correct me in the comments if I was wrong, if I'm wrong, but I believe he walked off the field under his own power with a broken ankle and ligament damage. So that just kind of goes to show you what kind of man Thomas Rawls is. But it was really, saddening to see him go down. That was, my heavy heart with that situation was reinforced tonight, with, watching the Thursday night football game, St. Louis and Tampa Bay. St. Louis and Tampa Bay. Those two teams, and I love the uniforms, by the way. St. Louis's uniforms, the all yellow, and Tampa Bay's all orange or all, whatever color it was, red. I like that. A lot of people, didn't really appreciate, the colors and, the color scheme of the new. I like them. I like those alternative uniforms, for those two teams. But, I'm a fan of tradition. But I like seeing new stuff come around. When the Seahawks came out with their brand new uniforms, I was on board. I was totally on board. I liked the way the ingenuity behind the coloring and, and the design. Great uniforms. I like all the new stuff. I like Tampa Bay's, I like Jacksonville's uniforms. I like all those. I like all that stuff. But that's just me. But, watching tonight's game, Todd Gurley was getting a lot of praise about being a rookie running back, getting to that 1,000-yard mark. You know, that's a big deal for a rookie running back to hit 1,000 yards. And when they started talking about that, it really upset me, because Thomas Rawls was on his way to busting that right out of the water. I mean, if the way Thomas Rawls was running early on Sunday against Baltimore, he might have had a 200-yard game then. You know, he just hits the hole with such speed and quickness. It just is unlike anything I've seen, even out of Marshawn Lynch. And we know how great Marshawn Lynch is, and has been, and then can be. But Thomas Rawls just had a different element to him. And maybe it's just the difference between the Marshawn Lynch we've been seeing this year, you know, versus the old Marshawn Lynch that the previous Marshawn Lynch. Maybe that's the real, discrepancy there. But he looked good, bottom line, really good. And he was on his way to 1,000 yards, and he hasn't played as many games as Todd Gurley has. And Todd Gurley didn't play all his games this season, but Thomas Rawls played an even less. And he was going to hit the 1,000-yard mark. I think it doesn't even have to, it isn't really even something you want to necessarily even debate about. Just running at the pace he was at. If he just continued at that pace, he would have hit the 1,000-yard mark. And you're talking about Todd Gurley being a possible, rookie of the year. So, Thomas Rawls would have had to squarely been in that conversation. So it's very sad to see. But, moving forward here, now we've got a running back by committee situation, it would seem, in Seattle. The first thing, was we signed Bryce Brown. Bryce Brown had, some success in Philadelphia. He looks like a strong runner. He looks quick. At least he did in Philadelphia. And that Philadelphia footage, his time in Philadelphia, that was reviewable, I believe I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but it wasn't all that recent. So I don't know where he actually stands as far as his, conditioning and ability right now, but I'm sure we'll see. I'm sure they're looking at all that, over there in Kirkland. But, Bryce Brown, based on the body of work that is, reviewable, he actually looks like he may fit the mold, of what we're looking for in a running back. He's quick. He hits the hole fast. He has the ability to change directions. He's a bit elusive. So I'm looking forward to see what he's able to do. Now, Bryce Brown was signed. So it seemed like, okay, between Bryce Brown and Dwan Harris, with Fred Jackson continuing doing what he does, and Derek Coleman, as a fullback, Will Tukwuafu as a fullback / tight end. Tukwuafu does whatever they ask him to do, which is, I really like that guy. That's how I figured that would go. But then we end up dropping Dwan Harris. We cut Dwan Harris. And when I saw that, I'm thinking, okay, now what does this mean? What does it mean when we sign Bryce Brown and then release Dwan Harris? Now, Dwan Harris, his game against Baltimore wasn't all that bad. I think he got 18 carries. He didn't wow anybody's pants off, or anything like that. But I mean, he had a reasonable day on his 18 carries. Got the job done. But I'm thinking, what does it mean with the releasing of Dwan Harris? Now, initially, I'm thinking, okay, that must mean that Marshawn is expected back more sooner than later. That's gotta be it, right? If we're going to let go of Dwan Harris, who's somebody that we signed, obviously with the intention on them being able to produce or, contribute, when we bring in another guy, so you're thinking, okay, running back by committee, but then we let go of a guy. So to me, that automatically said to me that, okay, Marshawn is on his way. They have confirmed that Marshawn is going to be back more sooner than later. And we have a game this week. We have a game this week against a team that is, dare I say, doesn't have a chance to beat us. And won't matter if we're, a man short, even though I wouldn't really call it a man short, but it won't matter if we don't have another player to add depth at that position. Chances are we're not going to need him anyway. I'm thinking, something along those lines, not to put it exactly, but, something along those lines there. But either way, I figured, they've got to feel that the guys we had minus DeJuan Harris would be able to handle it. And then we signed Christine Michael. Now, Christine Michael, a guy who's already been in our system. The pickup makes sense, or re-sign Christine Michael, I should say. It makes sense. It makes sense to pick up Christine Michael, except for the fact that Christine Michael has now been on 2 other rosters and not been able to find success, find a home. So that's concerning. If we already once let the guy go, and then he went to Dallas and Washington, and I'm not sure which one he went to first, but he went to both, and he ran the ball a little bit in Dallas. Yeah, Christine Michael is back with the Seahawks, back with us. So as a player who's already been in our system, who should be able to just fall right back into place, it stands to reason that he is likely to see a bulk of the carries. At least as far as those 3 guys go, or I guess as far as Bryce Brown, Christine Michael, and Fred Jackson go. Because Fred Jackson so far has simply been more of a spell back, and a third down, out of the backfield, catch the ball out of the backfield type of guy. Hasn't really had a lot of first and second down, opportunities this season. So it's really interesting now. It's really interesting now. What I think is going to happen is, it's probably going to be Bryce Brown and Christine Michael, two-headed monster, if you will. But what I'd really like to see is Derek Coleman. And I say Derek Coleman because you think, okay, Derek Coleman has played fullback for us now for a number of years. And he's done well. He came in behind Mike Robb. Michael Robinson retired. Derek Coleman came in, and he's done a pretty good job. He was hurt for a little while, but he's back, and he's doing well at the fullback spot when he's in there. Tukuafu has taken some of that load away from him in a lot of situations. But either way, Derek Coleman got a couple carries at the tailback, or had a couple snaps, I should say, at the tailback position on Sunday against Baltimore. And he busted one for a pretty decent gain, and he looked fast. I was a little bit surprised at the way that he ran the ball on the play that I'm referring to. I didn't really realize that he had the ability to move like that. So I'm actually wondering if Derek Coleman might not get some snaps at the tailback spot. If they're going to be moving guys around there anyway, if it's going to be a round robin of halfbacks, why not throw Derek Coleman there and see what he can do? Another guy who knows the system. And not only does he know the system, as a tailback, he knows it as a fullback. And, he's going to be able to maybe in some ways, think a step ahead, because he knows how to play the game as a fullback, which means he knows what the guy blocking for him is is supposed to do. So that may even give him a little bit of an advantage. It's kind of like, what I mean by that in the same respect that Richard Sherman used to play wide receiver. So he has an advantage at playing the cornerback position because he used to play wide receiver. I'm applying that same logic here with Derek Coleman playing tailback where he normally plays fullback. So we'll see what happens there. You never know. Maybe all three guys will split carries, and we'll have three. Probably have 140, 150 rushing yards split between three guys, and hey, whatever works. Team rushing is really what it boils down to. It doesn't really ever boil down to one player's individual stats. So if we get 150 yards rushing between three guys, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing as 150 yards rushing with one guy. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens there. Mike Pettin. Mike Pettin made some comments. I think the comments are probably taken a bit out of context. Probably more is being made of the comments than they're really worth. Well, I take that back. Mike Pettin made two comments, or comments about two subjects. The first subject was about Russell Wilson, and Mike Pettin, in his opinion, says that he felt that Russell Wilson was a second-tier quarterback when asked about, Russell Wilson in comparison to the great elite quarterbacks. For example, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees. Mike Pettin said that he felt that Russell Wilson was a second-tier quarterback. And for the reasoning that he said what he said, I can't really say that he's wrong. I think media at large went real deep, went a long way to try to make it sound like something else was implied by Pettin's comments other than what was said. He's simply saying, based on body of work, Russell Wilson isn't where, isn't where Tom Brady is, isn't where Drew Brees is, isn't where Aaron Rodgers is, isn't where Peyton Manning is. He didn't say that he's not as good of a quarterback. He didn't say those words. But if you want to talk about body of work, well, Russell Wilson hasn't even been in the league long enough to produce that body of work. Now, Russell Wilson does have more Super Bowl appearances than a couple of those guys on that list. But he doesn't have the numbers. Now, it stands to reason that Russell Wilson will indeed have those numbers one day. But that's one day. And no one out here is clairvoyant. We don't know what's going to happen if Russell Wilson's going to break his knee on Sunday. We don't know what's going to happen there. Heaven forbid that happens. But, based on body of work, Russell Wilson's not there. You can't say that this guy is as good as that guy based on what he possibly can do. They're talking about what he has done. Peyton Manning is a all-time leading quarterback. Tom Brady's an all-time leading quarterback in one stat or another. Aaron Rodgers has all kinds of yards and touchdowns. Drew Brees all kinds of yards and touchdowns. Russell Wilson will get there. I'll tell you that right now. Russell Wilson will get there. And he'll get there soon. And then when you ask Mike Pettin that question in about 3 or 4 years, he'll probably change his tune. I would have to assume, if he's a reasonable man. But I don't think that Mike Pettin was actually downplaying Russell Wilson's ability. I don't think he's that foolish. Mike Pettin seems to be one of those guys who wears his heart on his sleeve, and says what's on his mind, says what he means and means what he says, and that's fine. I can deal with that. But I don't believe he was downplaying Russell Wilson's ability. If he was, he's in for a rude awakening. But I don't believe that was the case. However, Mike Pettin did also make some comments about playing at the clink. And this is where I will hold him responsible for his words. Because again, this is maybe taken out of context, but it's the way I heard it come out of his mouth. The way I felt when I heard him say it was about the level of the noise and the clink for opposing teams. To me, his comments were, yeah, Harold, I know it's loud, and I'm paraphrasing here, but yeah, I know it's loud, but yeah, sometimes you have to cover your ear holes on the helmet to hear what's going on, but the microphones are good. They're right next to your ear. I don't see why it would be a problem. More or less that's what he said. That to me sounded like a discrediting of the real deal effect that playing in CenturyLink Field as an opposing team will have on you, can and will have on you. That to me was downplaying the 12s. I almost said 12th man, and we're not the 12th man anymore. We're just the 12s. Shout out to Texas A&M. But yes, the 12s. They're downplaying the 12s. They're downplaying us. So I wish I hope that I can get this going viral. That Mike Pettin is downplaying the noise and the clink so they can make it extra loud. I don't know if Mike Pettin has ever been to the clink before. I know he's a new coach for the Browns. I don't know where he's been in his assistant and his assistant coaching days and all that stuff. I don't know if he's ever been to the clink before as a coach or a player. Yeah, even if he has, I think he's in for a rude awakening. The best way I've ever heard it explained to me, the best way I've ever heard anyone try to explain the noise and the clink, is that it's so loud. And there's certain parts of the stadium you can be in where it's louder than others. But in the loudest parts, which is more parts than not, it's so loud that the noise literally turns into physical energy. And if you think about that, if you try to really rationalize that thought, like noise, so much noise that the noise turns into something you could almost touch. That's loud. It kind of makes you understand why Colin Kaepernick comes in there and completely loses his head every single time he plays against the Seahawks in the clink. It's got to be mind-blowing to try to play any position, let alone quarterback. And now you want Johnny Manziel to come in there and cover his ear holes and listen to the play call and then get into the huddle and relay that information to the other 10 guys in the field, and then get up to the line and call out his cadence, make adjustments from the line with the crowd roaring. I don't see a guy like Johnny Manziel being able to overcome that unless, and I will say this and I mean this, unless Johnny Manziel gets out there and just says, hell with it. If Johnny Manziel gets out, and I can say this, and I actually mean this, if Johnny Manziel gets out there on that field and just takes his kind of cavalier attitude that I think he kind of has, and just says, hey, whatever, and just goes out there and just starts slinging it, hey, that might be the way to beat the clink. That could be the way to beat the clink. Is just to go out there, say the hell with it, and just start slinging the ball. Just start slinging it. Don't think too much, because you can't think with all that noise and you're rattling your head. Your brain's got to be rattling around with all that noise. Try to think too much, you're gonna mess up. Just go out there and sling it. Maybe that is the key to winning at the clink. Now Seattle's lost at home a couple times this year, so that's let's not go too deep into that. I don't need anybody saying, oh, what about the teams that already beat Seattle at home? Yeah, we lost at home, but we lost at home under a slightly different situation. But But yeah, maybe Johnny Manziel might go out there and actually surprise us. As I said earlier, this week does bring about clinching situations, clinching and elimination situations. Tampa Bay has been eliminated from playoff contention with their loss tonight to St. Louis. Big up to thanks. Thanks and shout out and big ups to St. Louis. St. Louis Rams, our division rivals. I would shake your hand, St. Louis Rams, one at a time, for taking care of Tampa Bay. Obviously, I never want anything other than bad things to happen to St. Louis, San Francisco, and Arizona on any given day. But in situations like this, St. Louis helped us out. Tampa Bay is now eliminated from playoff contention. Makes life easier on us. And if New York loses, and I believe they play Carolina, if they lose, Seattle has clinched. We clinch with a New York Giant loss, and us beating Cleveland, of course. It's nice to clinch with a couple weeks left to go, because if we clinch on Sunday, then we have 2 weeks of football left to really, decide how you want to enter into the postseason. Seeding will still be an issue, I suppose, at least going into week 16. There's a good chance that the week 17 game against the Arizona Cardinals will just be a formality. I believe that by the time we get to week 17, it'll already be decided. So I'm not really worried about that. We already have the 5th seed, with the tiebreaker over Minnesota. And Minnesota really has just not been playing very good at all. And they've got Chicago on Sunday, who could easily pull off what I was assumed would be an upset. And then they have the Giants, and then they have Green Bay. So really, we look at, them falling all the way out of the playoffs, just completely out of the playoffs. That's a possibility. So if Minnesota doesn't get themselves figured out real quick, being that 6th seed team is not necessarily a bad thing when you're playing like the Seahawks are playing. You're on the uprise. Even over on the AFC, you got Kansas City. They're the 5th seed, but they're on the rise. You got New York. New York is kind of treading water right now, but they're not tanking at the end of the season. Over on the NFC, you got Seattle, who's playing better each week. We're 8-5. Yes, it's true, but each week over the last 4 or 5 weeks, we've been getting better each week. Meanwhile, Minnesota has been getting worse progressively. They could still lose their playoff spot to either Atlanta, Philly, or New York. So it's not over for Minnesota. They still got some work to do. But playoff clinching is upon us, and Seattle again with Tampa Bay losing tonight. All we have to do is win on Sunday and get Carolina to go ahead and beat up on the Giants, and that's a wrap. We're in. Seattle getting this 5 seed was imperative, if you ask me. And I say imperative because it really just makes our deep run into the playoffs so much more likely from the 5 seed spot than the 6th. it would have been nice to, win the division. But that's done for. I mean, it's not mathematically done, but you can pretty much cancel Christmas on that notion. But it would have been nice. But, the 5th and the 6th seed make this playoff run quite a bit different. From the 6th seed, assuming that the NFC stays the way it does, Seattle, if Seattle and Minnesota were flip-flopped again, Seattle at the 6th spot will be going to take on Green Bay in the wild card round. And not that we can't go into Green Bay and win. We didn't this year. But it wasn't necessarily like they went in there and just dismantled us. It was a good game. It was a close game. We had an opportunity here and there to win. He just didn't, get it. But, I mean, not an unwinnable game. But easily a more difficult game than what our current situation is. In the 5 seed, we'll be going to Washington. Now, some might argue that if their team is going to win the big one, they don't want to see their team go about it the easiest way, taking the easy way out, or taking the easy route. And I call hogwash on that notion, on that thought, hogwash on that, on any notion of that sort. Bruce Lee has a famous quote about water. And Bruce Lee is quite often, by many people, thought of to be superhuman. I know when I see the things that Bruce Lee did, unless somehow the video footage that I've seen has somehow been tampered with or altered, Bruce Lee did some pretty superhuman stuff. And Bruce Lee says that it's best to be like water. Right? When you put water into a bowl, water becomes the bowl. When you put water into a teapot, it becomes a teapot. When you put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. Right? Water will be whatever you need it to be. It changes with necessity. Kind of like the Seahawks. It says water can flow or water can crash. Be water, my friends. Those are poignant words from the great Bruce Lee. Water, one of the most, can be the most formidable forces on the planet. Water. You've seen water destroy things with just no effort. Water just bowls large barriers over. But even water takes the path of least resistance. As strong and as forceful as water can be and is, even water takes the path of least resistance. Right? So it makes sense. I hope you guys like a little analogy there. It makes sense for Seattle to go ahead and take this 5 seed, or to want to get this 5 seed, to go on and take on the winner of the NFC East in that 4th spot. And everybody who's anybody knows that nobody from the East is doing anything in the playoffs except going one and done. It won't matter if it's Washington, Dallas, Philadelphia, or New York. Whichever one of those teams manages to stumble their way in, neither one of them is going to do anything once they're there. It will be just their season will be elongated by one extra game. Extended by one game. That's it. So why not go ahead and beat up on the Redskins, at their house. Once again, hopefully Richard Sherman doesn't get punched in the face by Trent Williams. But go over there, beat them up real quick. Hopefully we don't lose any of our star players to an ACL injury like we did last time. But yeah, it'll be like a practice game, a warm-up game against a team that has no chance, just to get our playoff feet wet, right? And then as the 5 seed taking out Washington, we'll probably end up seeing Carolina. because I have to pretty much go ahead and assume that with the way they're looking right now, Minnesota will not beat Green Bay in Green Bay. So that means that the 5 will play the 1 and the 3 will play the 2. So Seattle will get to go to Carolina and return the favor against Cam Newton and Greg Olsen. Take out the Carolina Panthers, in their house. Give them, say, hey, see how they like it. I know they got tired of losing to us at their own place, and then we beat them at our place in the playoffs. They came in here this season and they beat us, and they would not let us forget about it. I have a lot of friends who are Carolina Panther fans. So we can go return the favor to them. And then the showdown. Seattle at Arizona, NFC Championship, another NFC West NFC Championship game. Go into Arizona's house, beat them. We didn't win the Super Bowl in their house. So it would be really nice to go ahead and knock them out of the playoffs in their house. Seattle's better than Carolina and Arizona. I'll go ahead and say that. Seattle is better than Carolina and Arizona. It's just unfortunate that we played them at a time this season where we just didn't have our stuff together. Both those games we were in. Both those games we led in the fourth quarter. I mean, really, it doesn't really matter, right? If you win, you win. You lose, you lose. All that matters is the score when the clock reads, triple zeros. But the reality of it is neither one of those games, and for that matter, any game that Seattle has lost over the past, 3 years, we're in it every time. Every game that we lost, all 5 games that we lost this year, we had a lead in the fourth quarter. Now that says just as much good things about us. It says just as much bad things about us as it does good. But the reality of it is we were in a position to win the game in every single game that we lost this year. And these games can go one way or another with really one play. One play makes a game go one way or the other. Right? It just so happens that 5 times, we were in the position, and that play that went one way or the other went the other way. So, other than that, the season isn't really too much different than last year. Last year we had a little bit of we stumbled out of the gate a little bit, but we just turned it on late, and look where we got. This year we're turning it on a little bit later even, but look where we're at. And people might say that the impressive play that we've been, the impressive, performances that we've been putting up right now have been against teams that were, subpar, teams that were far lesser teams than us. But I guess I would say you wouldn't really know that until after the fact. And hindsight is 2020. When we played against Minnesota, no one expected us to blow out Minnesota. Nobody expected us to go out there and blow out Minnesota. And I was surprised at that. I was surprised no one expected us to blow out Minnesota. How could you not expect us to blow out a quarterback like Teddy Bridgewater? Regardless of the fact that they had Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson, that's what we make. We've made history out of stopping big time running backs over the last few years. Adrian Peterson was manhandled by the Seattle Seahawks defense, and Teddy Bridgewater couldn't do anything about it on his own. And now I saw that coming. I don't know why so many other people didn't. The Baltimore game, the Pittsburgh game, even the Pittsburgh game. Now the Pittsburgh game, people want to say that the Seattle Seahawks defense is still suspect because Ben Roethlisberger threw for so many yards. They didn't rush for any yards in that game. But Ben Roethlisberger threw for almost 500 yards. That's a lot of yards for a quarterback to throw against a defense. But Roethlisberger threw the ball 55 times. 55 times. Just in case you don't know, 55 is almost 60. Any quarterback who throws the ball nearly 60 times in a game better throw for nearly 500 yards. Because I guarantee you, if you throw the ball nearly 60 times in one single game and you don't have 350, 450 yards passing, you don't have a job next week. How do you throw the ball that many times and not rack up that many yards? How do you throw the ball that many times, even if you only throw underneath routes and dump offs? How do you throw the ball 55 times in the game and a couple of those not end up just, breaking tackles and going the distance or something like that? That's way too many throws to not have close to 500 yards passing. So that's a skewed, the skewed measurement. The Pittsburgh game, Ben Roethlisberger carving us up. Now, if I went out there at quarterback and threw the ball 60 times, I probably wouldn't throw for 450 yards, but I'd put up more yards than if I only threw the ball 28 times or 32 times, which is more reasonable. So that's a skewed number. It's a skewed result there. Baltimore, Baltimore is a team that I thought that game was a potential trap game. Especially because, Seattle had to go on the road, 10 a.m. game. I wasn't worried about the game till it got flexed. Once it got flexed, then I got a little bit worried. I was like, okay, East Coast game, 10 a.m. kickoff, 10 a.m. Pacific time. Historically speaking, we don't do too well in these situations. But we handled it. Passed that test with flying colors. Now we have Cleveland at home. There's just, we're running on all cylinders right now. There's just no way Johnny Manziel, pulls any rabbits out of his hat. I'd say the next potential trap game is the St. Louis game. But again, if we can just get New York, get the Panthers to beat New York, we're fine. We're already in. The St. Louis game could potentially, if they found a way to beat us, could potentially drop us back to the 6th seed. But again, you got to think Pete Carroll's got that in mind. We don't want to go back to Green Bay, not in the first round. But we'll see. What's going to end up happening is we're going to win these two games. We're going to beat Cleveland. We're going to beat St. Louis. The game against the Cardinals in week 17 is going to be a formality game. It's going to be a game that just has to be played because there's 17 weeks in the season. It's not going to have any effect on the seeding. It's not going to have any effect except for putting a notch in either the win or the loss column, but it's not going to change anything. By week 17, the playoff seeding will be set. So that will be a game where you rest. You might have Russell Wilson play a series or two. We'll get Tavares Jackson in there. You get those running backs, get themselves a few more snaps under their belt, so they're ready for the playoffs. Get some of those defensive guys who are banged up, get them some time to rest. Really, if you look at the way it's shaping up here, the way it's coming together, all signs point to Seattle going back to the Super Bowl. If you really just look at it, with some objectivity here, the way that it's shaping up. Okay? Now I'm going to talk about the NFC. I'm not worried about the AFC too much. I don't really worry about the AFC, right? I'm an NFC guy. It's shaping up for Seattle. It just is shaping up that way. The way that it's working out. Arizona's going to have the same situation. Arizona has clinched, so they don't really have to fight for too much more unless they want to get, no, they don't actually, they don't have it. Matter of fact, they've already, let's see here. Yeah, so they can still actually get the first round bye, the home field advantage from Carolina. So if Bruce Arians and company over there at Arizona want to, and I'm sure they do, with 3 games left to play, they still have a chance to snatch home field advantage throughout. And that's something to play for. That is something to play for. So that might, So depending on what happens, within the next week or two. Now, I suppose with that one caveat, that'd be the one caveat. If Arizona is still mathematically has a chance to get home field throughout in week 17, so that would mean that Carolina loses 2 of its next 3. At least 2 of its next 3. That would mean week 17 could definitely, could at that point have a chance for Arizona to get snatch that from them. Then it would be a different situation. But if it's not going to change anything for Seattle, we might go ahead and just let them have that, right? If it's not going to change anything for us, then what's the point of really, putting the starters out there for that? So again, it really boils down to Seattle having nothing but opportunity here. We have the 5 seed, which means we got an easy game first round, easy wild card game. And then we get to go into Arizona fresh. I think we're going back to the Super Bowl. I really do. I do believe we're going back to the Super Bowl this year. And we'll win it this year. You heard it right here. Well, I'll say you heard it here first, but you probably didn't hear it here first. But you heard it here nonetheless. All right. 12s. I suppose I've rattled on long enough here. This is Rob English, your SoCal Seahawk, and you have been listening to Short Yardage. I will be touching bases with you all again on Monday with Going the Distance to recap the Cleveland game and figure out what happened in that game, why it happened, and how it's going to happen again, and talk about what's going to be moving forward into the St. Louis week. So, that's all we got. Thank you for listening, and go Hawks.